Hello, my dear friends. Operator.starsky here. Ellie, I brought you coffee. I will drink it myself, of course. Anyways, I have a story to tell. And the reason this story emerged was because the other day I decided to ask my mom about my grandpa. And there in the description, I'm talking about my grandpa. Actually, it's my great grandpa. Anyways, because generally I know a lot about my father's family and everything else, because, you know, like mom's family, meh, right? Like my father used to say, like, as if it was a competition. But I knew about my paternal family, right, a lot. There's Ukrainians, there's Polish guys, but I didn't know much about my maternal bloodline. So I decided to ask. About my grandpa because all I knew was that basically he worked in the mine, right, in the quarry. He was miner his whole life and like nothing special. And when she started revealing the whole story, it was such an emotional moment, guys, because I know about cases of Holodomor in my family when my relatives, my like grandparents, would not survive this artificial famine created by Russians. Miroslav there in the chat. Hello, my friend. And Joe Perkovsky also did that. I would really like to know your story, by the way, as well. But guys, what I learned was actually so, I don't know, calling this tragic is not even the word. It's actually underestimation, to call it tragic, because it's so crazy. But besides that, I did some research and found some traces. But before I start talking about that, let me tell you about my family just a bit. And not just one family, two families. Okay, because we all have plenty of grandmas and parents. Like, you are a person who has at least 4 grandparents, which means they come from each family. It's fascinating. I have no idea why we multiply if it's supposed to be the other way. But anyways, I'm not a biologist. Actually, I don't care. But there are 2 families, and one family starts its path actually in the Balkans, my friends. So in this general area in the Balkans, like Serbia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, somewhere there, that, my friends, was the family that I know under the name last Starenko. And those were actually gypsies. Guys, I have quite a few liters of gypsy blood in me, as it turns out. Actually, I am a perfect example of, like white supremacist Ukrainian Nazi. Because I'm a gypsy. Raise your hands if you have horses, my friends. You don't? That's apparently because I stole them. So I have gypsy blood a lot, and that is something that I knew, actually. What's the story? The story is following. There was this long caravan of gypsies, Romale, like we know that there are different types of gypsies. We're talking about the Roms gypsies, right? The Romale guys. And they were traveling from Balkans to the territory of Ukraine, that back in those days was part of the Russian, Terror Russian Empire. That was like 19th century. All right. And they were moving slowly, and in the Mykolaiv region, they stopped for a while. And in that group of gypsies, in that caravan, there was a husband and a wife. The wife was very, very sick, and basically she was dying. And the gypsies didn't really know what to do. They didn't have like proper medicine. They didn't know how to cure her disease. So her husband decided to stay in that village, at least for a while, until she's healed. And the whole caravan moved and left them in that village. And we are talking specifically about the village of Kashirka. It's here in the Mykolaiv region. That's Kryvyi Rih, that's where our president was born, and we will talk about it just a bit later. But here, if we zoom, we can see this place called Kashirka. It's a really interesting place, guys, because if you look at it, you can see that it's located like in the corner between two oblasts. This is the Kirovohradska Oblast, right? This is Dniprovska Oblast, and this is Mykolaievska Oblast. So it's like in the very, very corner, which makes this village special. And then if you check out the pictures, oh my God, like look at this bridge, my friends. It's crazy, and I think that it's still there. They have like a water reservoir, water body there. There's this bridge that you can see, and like those typical Ukrainian village houses. I don't know what to say. It's like a very, very typical Ukrainian village. The nature, of course, is absolutely fantastic. That little guy, again, it's a very, very typical thing for a Ukrainian village. A stork, because stork, of course, brings babies. And basically, this is how Ukrainians multiply, if you didn't know. But I don't want the sidebar, thank you very much. So, the gypsies, the husband and the wife, stayed in the village. And miraculously, the wife was cured. Even though her disease, I don't know what it was, but she was basically dying. And she stayed there in that village with her husband, and she got cured. And those gypsies were not really stealing horses, you know, like I was exaggerating, of course. That very guy, that my grandpa, he's the very reason why I love metal, why I'm a metalhead. That is literally because he was a blacksmith. And again, I don't know his name. Probably my mother knows some of like her closer grandparents' names, but what I know is that he was a blacksmith, and not just a blacksmith, he was a kick-ass blacksmith. So he did all sorts of things from metal. He was very much, he was really, really good. And he became very famous because of that. So he settled in that village together with his wife. They built a house, and that my great-great-grandpa, what he did, he basically built like metal fence around his house, and he built his house with a metal roof. So it was like a unique building there, and the people in the village would say that he would often, you know, open the gates, and he had like a wagon with like 2 or 3 horses, something like that, and he would just go down the village, and everybody would be like, oh my God, that dude is so cool, basically a rock star. So he became so famous, so eventually they started, and this is, by the way, something that I didn't look into, because if his name was either Starenko or Starov, because, you know, in the Russian Empire, they would change Ukrainian names very, very often due to the Russification. I gotta look into this. So he became so famous, so his business, his smithery, started growing. He expanded it, and he even hired a lot of guys from the local villages to work at that blacksmith. He was literally like hiring employees, paying them salaries, because that business expanded like crazy. So that was like one part of my family. Let's put them here, like on this side of the spectrum. That is Starenko, okay? Those guys. And then they had like lineage, like several generations, which basically were all blacksmiths. They all worked at the same smithery, and they were all known. There were like dynasty of them. Shifting from Mykolaiv region a bit to the east, there was a different guy. Let's put him on this side of spectrum, okay? So this guy, where he comes from, we can see Ukraine, right? And over here, we can see this amazing tiny Russian region called Krasnodar. That is basically Kuban. And if you saw my previous video on the UATV on the difference between Ukrainian Cossacks and Russian Kazaki, you probably know that that whole region over there, it was populated by ethnic Ukrainians. I checked this information, and during the Tsarist times, the population, the Ukrainian-speaking population in Krasnodar was much bigger than the Russian-speaking population. And that is where, my friends, that is where, this guy emerges. So his name was Arseni, all right? And we don't really know much about his last name. Not much known about like his past and everything else. What I know is that he was born around 1850s, I think, because by the time of the Bolshevik Revolution and Bolshevik invasion of Ukraine, he was like an old grandpa. He was like in the 20s of 20th century. He was like between 70 and probably 90 years old. I think rather 90. What we know about him? We know that he had a son, okay? His son's name was Timothy, this guy, all right? Arseni and Timothy had a Ukrainian last name, which nobody knows. But back in those days, there was this policy of soft Russification. And what we know is that at some point, the local officials came to those guys and they said, guys, this is like Russian Empire, right? You gotta do something. Because if your last name is like, I don't know, Perebrynis, whatever, Nohuzaderyshenko, then of course it's not really good to have this one. So you gotta change your last name and, like, you know, wear fafudia, go to the Russian church, and basically do all that crazy shit that assimilated people do if they want to become a higher race, if they want to become supreme Russian people. So they said, like, Wafa Napoli, we don't want to do that. But eventually they were forced So eventually they were forced to change their last name to, sorry, that's a wrong letter. This is how we write the last name Lomov. All right, I will write it in Latin letters for you guys. And that was their last name. So, what happened next? Eventually, they were like pushed to change, like go to the Russian church, don't speak Ukrainian language, you suck. You're freaking peasants, and things like that. And eventually, they decided not to stay there because F that freaking place, and they decided to move. And where did they move? My friends, they moved to this very little town of Kashirka. That is Kazanka. Kazanka is basically very historically rich place in Ukraine. And again, as you can see, it's very, very close to the city of Kryvyi Rih. And we will talk about it a bit later. But they moved to Kazansky region and they settled in the village of Kashirka. Well, where the hell is it? I was just looking at it. Anyways, it's somewhere there. So what happened next? They moved there, they settled there, and eventually they decided to do something about the freaking grain. And again, guys, it was during the Tsarist times, right? They decided to do something to solve the problem with the freaking grain, because everyone grew crops, everyone had plenty of wheat, and they had grain, but they had no flour, they had no mill in the area, and they would buy or gather like 1 ton of crops of grain, and they would have to take the grain and travel like several hundred kilometers to the Kirovohradsky region, to Kropivnitsky, and sell grain for flour. Okay, and then they had to bring the flour all the way back to Kashirivka. How freaking crazy is that? They had no mill. But it turns out that these two guys, all right, it turns out that they were millers. They were like they had a tiny business, all right, back in the Terror Russia. So they were millers, miller, right? They were milling the grain. And they decided, like, the hell with those peasants, let's build a mill. So they built a mill, and remember those pictures that I showed you, that I showed you from the Kashirivka, like that body of water, right? So there's a river, and there was a river mill actually. So that guy, the older one, all right, he was an inventor. Actually, he was very good with mechanics, with engineering, and he actually built a river mill. And his son, this one, all right, helped him because basically it was his craft. Eventually, they started milling, and they again became very, very famous in that area because people would come to them with grain, they would receive their flour, and everybody were happy. One thing about these, like this family, right, and this family. So, because these guys were building stuff, they were engineers and constructors. From time to time, of course, they needed to find some kind of metal parts, right? They needed some specific metal parts for their like crazy inventions. And I think you understand where it's coming to, right? Because this guy who lived in the same village was an extremely famous blacksmith, right? And this is how these two families basically met. So eventually, this guy, Timothy, right? He had two sons. There was another guy also called Timothy, and there was another guy called Vasil. These guys married, like at least this guy, Vasil, married one of the daughters of this guy, the Gypsy, and the daughter's name was, oh my god, was Uliana. So they married, but besides these two sons, this guy, all right, he also had several daughters. Like the family was very big. If you know just a bit about Ukrainian families, you know that we had plenty of kids. At some point, my great grandpa, I'm talking about my paternal line, he had something like 13 kids, all right? So, like, it was crazy, but Ukrainians generally multiplied. We liked this stuff, and one of the reasons for the Russian introduced famine in Ukraine, the Holodomor that killed millions of Ukrainians, was basically because they were afraid of our population. Ukrainians did uprisings. We fought all the time. Communists were like coming here, they would be freaking burned and killed and fucked next day. And you would see that because Ukrainians did not just like, you know, like we are stupid peasants. No, we are stupid peasants, but we were angry fucking peasants. And we were literally slaughtering those commies coming from Russia like a freaking, I don't know. So, before that, okay, this guy, as I said, he had like big family, and together with his father, they lived in Kashirka. They had a mill. Eventually, they built a windmill because, you know, like kids were like throwing stuff in the river, trying to stop the mill, actually, and they succeeded. You know, like kids, Ukrainian kids, they either threw sticks or like Molotov cocktails like they always do. So Timothy, this guy, he decided to clear the river, like to fix the river mill, and he went there and he nearly drowned. And that was the moment when he said, like, you know, F those kids, let's build a windmill. And they actually built a windmill. So this story continues. There is a freaking communist revolution there in Russia. They kill the Tsarist family. And eventually they start invading Ukraine. Besides their military invasion, which was introduced by Denikin, Muravyov, and other fucks, there was also hybrid invasion because they started like spreading this plague of communism, you know, in Ukraine, all the worker unions and everything else. And eventually they came to these two grandparents, right? And the chief of the local kolkhoz came to them. What is local kolkhoz? What is kolkhoz in general? I think that this stuff sounds familiar to you. To those who don't know, basically what they did in the Soviet times, they would gather all of the cattle from the villagers. You grow your cow for years. You grow your like rabbits, chicken, anything, everything else. Then communists come to you and they say, like, dude, let's make this stuff collective. We'll gather everything together and we will, like, make sure that our whole community survives. And they would take your cattle, bring it to the kolkhoz. Kolkhoz is коллективное хозяйство, or collective, or like communal agricultural unity, let's call it this way. And basically, this is how you would lose all you had. And of course, not necessarily your stuff, coming from your cow, like all the products from your cattle and chicken and everything else would be disseminated between the villagers, because they would generally send it straight to Moscow. And this is what they did during the Holodomor, during that tragic artificial famine, because all the cattle that they took from the villagers, all that cattle was literally sent to Russia to feed Russian soldiers and everything else, while Ukrainian people were dying in millions. And of course, they had no chance to bring anything like they found on their way. There was this law of 5 wheats. If they find 5 wheats in your pocket, you will be shot. But before all that happened, it was like 20s. The chief of the kolkhoz, of the newly established kolkhoz, comes to my grandpas and they say, let's share everything, because we're communists now. Let's share everything. You have to give your cattle, your windmill. It doesn't belong to you anymore. It can be our mutual rights. And my grandpas said, "Wafa Napoli, fuck you." All right. And he said, "Well, you will be sorry," and he left. Eventually, he sent the Red Army, the Russian Bolsheviks, all sorts of destitute imbeciles who didn't want to work or didn't want to study, and basically they had no other choice but to join the revolutionary communist Russian Red Army and rob people on the vast territory of the Soviet Union. So they sent those thugs and bandits to my grandparents, and they said, well, you're going to Siberia. The older Arseni, he was, as my mother told me, he was 90 years old. And he said, well, okay, let me find something in the attic. And he put the ladder, he attached the ladder to the wall, he climbed up the ladder, and he, purposely, he fell down from the attic and died. He broke his neck. He committed a suicide. Timothy was told to go to Siberia, but what they did before that, these two sons, Vasil and Timothy, they were sent to Kryvyi Rih, actually. And in the Kryvyi Rih, we have plenty of mines, quarries, and they were sent to Kryvyi Rih because they knew a guy who worked at a mine, or he had a mine, actually. He was one of the directors. So he basically wrote several letters that would confirm that these two guys, right, they were needed there at the mine. That's why they had reserve. They were reserved. But their father and his two daughters and his wife, they were sent to Siberia. And on their way to Siberia, because it's a very long way that takes weeks on a train in horrible conditions, his wife and his both daughters got sick and on their way, they all died. So Timothy made it alone, and his both daughters and his wife died on the way there. Scrolling a bit forward, we know that Timothy, this grandpa, right? Timothy, he was born in like late 19th century. So after returning from Siberia, because he was there in the like gulag or whatever, that camp, you know, for prisoners like him, because he was a villager, he was a rich villager, meaning that he was a public enemy in the Soviet Union. So eventually he returned, but he never returned back to Ukraine. He returned to Krasnodar, where he settled, and that's basically where he died from the old age. His daughter would come from that area to Kryvyi Rih time to time. I remember that she came to the funeral of my grandpa, his new daughter, right? Because then he found he established a new family and everything else. So we didn't know much about her, and then she appeared. But the family from Ukraine that he traveled with to Siberia, they died. Sorry, they were not died. Actually, they were, I consider it, being killed by the Russian Bolsheviks. Let's call it for what it is, right? They were murdered because they were forcefully deported, and they died in horrible conditions on their way there to Siberia. But switching to these two guys, all right, and specifically to this guy, Vasil. We know that Vasil was born around 1907, 1909. And the reason we know about it was because his wife, Uliana, right, the gypsy girl, she was born in 1906. And they married, and he was like a year or couple years younger than her. That is according to our grandmas and grandpas who knew them, right? So they say that Vasil, this guy, he was like a year or couple years younger. So his date of birth is like between 1907 and 1909. Not younger and not older than that, I would say. Their story is crazy. So they lived in Veraba. Veraba is like a tiny region in Kryvyi Rih. I will show you, okay? Because that is where my grandparents actually lived. Vera Cruz, not Vera Cruz, my friends. Veraba. So this is like a tiny, I don't know, village, right? My grandpa's house was somewhere there. And right next to it, you can see this freaking huge quarry. It's giant, my friends. It really is giant. There is like this giant quarry in Kerpen, right, in Germany, that is considered like the biggest in Europe. Haha, my friends, you haven't seen this one. And this is not the only quarry that we've had back there, because you look at places like these, for example, there were a lot of quarries in that area, because that area was rich in all sorts of metals and everything else. And that was the reason why I was sick every single time when I was there. When I was visiting my grandparents there in Veraba, I acquired something that is officially known as allergic asthma. It's asthma, but it's not like my chronic condition. It's allergic asthma, meaning that as soon as I'm exposed to that amazing dust of Veraba and Kryvyi Rih region in general, I would literally choke and almost die. I've been as a kid, as like 4 or 5 years old, I've been to hospital several times. Ambulance took me to the hospital, and I was lucky because it was like Soviet ambulance, so I'm like twice lucky I survived that shit. One time I was taken because there was a suspicion that I had an appendicitis, but it wasn't the case. I just ate too much green pears, and I had like plenty of gases, so they gave me like a pill. I farted for a whole hour like a freaking behemoth, and I was like 5 years old, and that saved me from like exploding. I have no idea. I produced so much methane so I could fill like that whole quarry, but that's not the thing. The thing is that Veraba village is where my Grandpa Vasil, like this one, I don't know where to show on the screen, Grandpa Vasil and his wife Uliana and their kids, where they lived. And Grandpa Vasil worked on the mine. So this is what we know. And this man here, is the hero of, like, the main character of our story. But before I talk about him, I gotta tell you just a couple of words about Grandma Uliana, because she was savage. You know, there are people who lose control like very, very fast, right? You literally tell them something, they just, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's the story. That's literally her. So she was a sweet person. She, like, you can imagine this beautiful black hair, curly hair, like this gypsy Ukrainian woman. Am I doing? Yes, I think I'm right. Yeah. So she would lose control very, very fast. All right. And there was a story when she was like sitting in the yard, and all Ukrainian villagers have had those orchards where we would grow like cucumbers, tomatoes, radish, parsley, watermelons, anything you tell me. And a piglet went to the orchard and started like eating cabbage. So Grandma Uliana took the shovel, right? The shovel, not the shovel itself, but like the stick from the shovel. And she hit a freaking pig so bad, so she killed it, like with a single blow. And she was tiny. She was not really even like a big woman. And she literally eliminated a piglet with a single blow in front of the villagers, in front of her neighbors. That's when they decided that, when you borrow money from Uliana, it's better to return them eventually, right? Otherwise it will be very, very hazardous for your health not to do that. So what we know, what happened next? Next, there is a German invasion of the Soviet Union. We know that Russian Red Army, the glorious communist army of thugs and thieves, was running away so fast, so Germans could not even bring enough people to control all the captured land in Ukraine, right? So they came and they occupied the area. And by the way, before it happened, of course, as the Red Army was retreating, chief of the mine where this Vasil was working, he said, we gotta organize an army of miners. And they received rifles, and they were grouped and turned from like a mining squad into a military squad. So they were fighting for a while. And they were fighting here and there, and without much success, of course, because they were not soldiers, right? They spent their whole life in the mine, and they were literally miners. They knew how to excavate shit, not how to bury people. So eventually they were encircled and captured by the Germans, and the Germans said, like, guys, where are you from? I'm from Kryvyi Rih, I'm from Kryvyi Rih, I'm from Kryvyi Rih. Who are you? Miner, 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 miner. Okay, all right. Well, if it's so, then, guys, give us your weapons. We know that you don't have enough ammo anyways, because, Russians were not really fond of providing their soldiers with enough ammo, as history shows. And just go home, okay? Just go. Go home. We will write you a letter, so you would be, like, led through the German checkpoints. You will show them the letter, you will go home, and then you will register at your place where you live, right, in your local area, at the commandant's office, and then we will decide what to do with you. And they're like, oh, we're not getting killed. Germans, like, nine, go home, you freaking peasant. And they went home. On their way home, and this is the story that was told by this guy himself, right, to his wife, I think. So on their way home, among them, there was this fanatic communist activist. And he said, Товарищи, we need to stop. We need to organize partisan group. We need to fight Nazis. We need to do something to, liberate our land from these thugs. However, they were the occupiers as well, right? And those miners, they said, dude, literally just fuck off, just go, all right? We don't want to see you. And the dude started, like, threatening them. He said, I will rat you out. I will tell the Communist Party about you, and you will be, like, punished for that. So eventually they found a river and turned this communist into a good communist in that very river. And basically they went home after that, which, by the way, I think it was a very proper thing to do, right? Please put a blue and yellow heart in the chat if you agree with me. So they went home. My grandpa went back to Veraba, and he continued to work on the mine. However, there wasn't much work because, from what we know, the Russians tried to destroy the mine before they retreated, and eventually they broke something or damaged. So there was job, but not much job for him to do. But he stayed there at the Veraba, and basically, yes, Test Rabbit, they baptized him really well. They really did a good job, in my opinion. All right, from the wave of blue and yellow hearts that I can see in the chat, I think I will continue the story. All right. What happened next? The story is crazy, and I didn't even start, like, talking about my investigation. That's a different thing. So guys, I hope that you have coffee or tea or something stronger. I have a bunch of coffee here myself because my voice is dying eventually, and I need to puff from time to time. But my grandma, and as you probably know, there were, like, polizei in the area. Who were the polizei? Polizei were basically locals who were hired by the Germans who occupied the area as policemen, as militia. Basically, they were like law enforcement. And my grandpa wasn't polizei. He was a miner, as I said. But there was a local polizei who was hired by the Germans. He was nasty. He was so nasty. Everyone hated him so much. He was a bad person, all right? So they hated him, because he would like rat people out, or like beat people up and stuff like that, just for fun. Um, and he kinda liked Grandma Uliana, right? He kinda liked her. Grandma Uliana by the time already had like 4 kids. Pardon, 2 kids. And a husband, like official husband. And while my grandfather was at the job, trying to work and provide for his family, that idiot dumbass would just visit my grandma and like Juliana, you know, and she would be like, dude, literally go away. I will kill you, serious. Just go, dude. I don't want to see you. And she would dump him all the time. Eventually, on that tragic night or day, he visited her again and he started like bullying her, harassing her, and she said like, fuck you, serious, like for real, dude, just get lost. He was really, really mad at her, of course, and there was a rooster in the yard, and as he was passing by, you know, he saw that rooster. He kicked the rooster in the head and killed the poor bird. So, as you probably understand, Grandma Uliana would not tolerate that shit. So she took the freaking stick from the shovel and with a single blow, she broke his fucking spine. And that dude collapsed, but he did not die, of course. He got severely wounded because apparently, like, if a spine is broken, then you cannot really call this person healthy. So he got evacuated to the hospital, and then grandpa arrives home. Well, grandpa, he was like 30, right? He arrives home and he sees plenty of police who say, dude, we gotta take your wife to the pit. So they had like a pit prepared for prisoners. They didn't have prisons, but they made a pit for prisoners, with like grates on top. And they like, we're taking your wife to the pit. He's like, what the hell happened? They're like, she almost killed one of our police. And he's like, well, apparently he did something bad, you know. And she's like, well, what do I do? And my grandpa says, guys, she has a newborn baby. How the hell do I feed a newborn baby? Can you imagine this? And they're like, well, somebody has to go to the pit. This is the rules. They're like, German people control this area now. There are rules and you have to obey. Somebody has to go to the pit. And my grandpa says, well, I will go. So my grandpa goes instead of my grandma to the pit. And he spends a fuckload of time literally sitting there in that makeshift prison instead of her. She stays home feeding kids, taking care after the cattle and everything else, like whatever she had, like chickens. And my grandpa Vasil is in the pit. After a while, he gets released, and as soon as he arrives home, he meets one of his friends who was also a policy, and he says, Vasil, I have bad news. So that dude that your wife Uliana hit with a shovel stick, apparently he's dying, and if he dies, she or you will be shot, all right? Because you cannot kill policy, you will be executed for this crime. So just so you know, okay? And Grandpa Vasil said, well, the hell should I do? So, late night, he takes the whole family. He takes a rifle that he found somewhere because there are a lot of weapons scattered in the area. He takes a rifle, he puts the rifle on the very bottom of this wagon, he puts everyone on top of wagon, and they travel from Veraba all the way back to Kashirka in the night. And as you probably understand, it's a completely different region, not too far, but far enough. So, like, they had no internet, no messengers, no cameras, so it would be really, really hard to identify him. On their way, they are searched because they pass checkpoints. Of course, Germans search their wagon. And when they arrive to Kashirka, and Grandma Uliana discovers that rifle on the bottom of the wagon, she starts yelling at Grandpa Vasil. She starts yelling at him. She's like, "You're a dumbass. What if they found a freaking rifle at the checkpoint? Are you freaking crazy? We would all get shot and executed because they're Germans, right?" But anyways, why did they go to Kashirka? So, as you remember, these guys, they had their big house in Kashirka, those that arrived from Krasnodar. They had that huge house that was taken from them, together with all their possessions, was taken from them by the Russian communists and Bolsheviks. And basically they were banished. So they still have the house in Kashirka. The house is closed. Grandpa Vasil goes to the local German commandant and he says, "Sir, we have like house here. We arrived from like a distant land. We were banished. We were villagers living in this house, and communists took this house from us." And the German is like, "Take it. If it's yours, take it." So they move back in their house. They move back in their house, and what do they find inside? Inside they find statues of Lenin. They find like those pioneer drums. Pioneers were basically like Hitlerjugend in the Nazi Germany, or Russia, Putlerjugend in current Nazi Russia. They were basically like an analog of Boy Scouts in the United States, only communist, okay? Communist slash fascist. So they had drums because they would always go with the drums. And there were also like several bags of salt found in that very house. And my grandpa was so mad, so he would take everything outside and just throw it and curse Russians and swear. And what is the difference between concentration camp and the Gulag? No difference. Basically, Germans snatched the idea of Gulag from Russian communists and Bolsheviks. That's the thing. So he starts like throwing the things out of his house, all that communist freaking shit. And my grandma is running around. She's like, "Vasil, what the hell are you doing? There's salt. We can, like, salt. It's like, it's worth gold. Come on, like, don't throw away salt." He's like, "Fuck this communist shit. I don't want anything communist in our house." Okay, and they stay in the house. Later, Grandpa Vasil went around the local forests and fields and found plenty of cattle because the people were like either bombed or ran away, the villagers, and they left a lot of cattle behind. So he found like an old cow, he found several chicken, he brought everything home, and they kind of started living, all right? We have no idea whether he was wanted or not back in Veraba because, well, apparently he was. I believe that policy didn't survive. Anyways, he stood against Babcia Uliana. He had no chance to survive. All right. So, what happened next? 1944, around this time, that's what we know. Around 1944, already his fourth kid was born, and the Germans were retreating from Ukraine, and they were taking people, the workers, the laborers, oh my god, forced labor workers, Ostarbeiter, right? They were taking them from like Soviet Union, from Ukraine, and bringing them to Germany to work. And there were plenty of people from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Poland, like all that territory. So we know that 1944, Grandpa was either forced to go or offered to go, or maybe he went himself because he thought, that's just my assumption, but he thought like, all right, if like Russians return to Kashirka and find me, right, or my family, like they know that we were villagers that were like punished for being villagers, if they find out about us, they will probably like kill us. So he decided to go to Germany and eventually bring the family together with him or something. That's like one of the versions. But Babcia Uliana, Grandma Uliana, she told this story. She said, like, Vasil, write letters, okay? And I don't know, like, if there will be like censorship or whatever. Send me like a dried flower, okay, in the letter. And he said, all right. And eventually she received a letter from Vasil with a tiny, tiny dried flower. I don't have it here to show you guys, but she received a letter with the flower. So generally, it meant that everything was fine. What happened later to the family of Babcia Uliana and her kids? We know that Germans retreated, Red Army reoccupied the territory, and they threw Babcia Uliana, together with her kids, out of that house in Kashirka, and she lived somewhere in the barn for a while at some of her neighbors, trying to survive together with the kids and cattle. And eventually she returned back to Veraba, and she found a house or built a house. So her story is tragic as well, because communists basically threw her out of her own house. But what we know about Grandpa Vasil, we know that he went to Ruhr, and the territory of Ruhr is this territory of Germany. It's basically like this big conglomerate of cities like Bremen, it's not in Bremen, like Essen, Düsseldorf, Duisburg, Oberhausen, you see Mülheim, Bottrop, Gelsenkirchen. Those are the territory of Ruhr, right? This is how it's called, Ruhr. All right, in German. So that is a big territory. That is like a freaking big territory. There's plenty of mines. There's like whole parks made from like old closed factories. There's metal mines, there's salt mines, coal mines, all sorts of mines. There's like a lot of them right in the area. And miraculously, that is very, very close to my current location. But we know that he went to Ruhr. Why we know about it is because near Kashirka there was like a neighboring village, and in that village there were two sisters who also went together with my grandpa Vasil to Germany, and they also worked in Ruhr. and they stayed there all the way until 1945. So since 1944, early 1944, and all the way until 1945, they were there. And they say the last thing we know about him, because when the war finished and people received a chance to return home, and they were crossing the checkpoint from the American-controlled or British-controlled part of Germany to Russia-controlled part of Germany, they say, we saw Vasil at the checkpoint at the American part of Germany. He was sitting and he looked very, very beat up, like with like black eyes, and as if he had some very, very nice brawl before that, right? And they didn't talk for some reason. I don't know why, but they say, we saw him, we didn't talk, we left, because there was this big queue of people, Ukrainians returning home and stuff like that. And that is where they saw him for the last time. So that is the end of the story, and that's what my mother told me literally like last week. That's what I learned from her. The audio stopped? No. It's not supposed to stop, my friend. It continues. Guys, please let me know if you can hear me, all right? All right, because mishaps may happen on this channel, all right? So that's the story of him. So there is a mystery because he never returned home. And my grandpa, which picture I don't have, but that is my direct grandpa, right? My mother's father, who was born from Vasil and Uliana. We have a grandpa, his name was Arkady. My grandpa was young, and he told all those crazy stories about, you know, like the mysterious visitors visiting his neighbors and talking and looking at the house before leaving. And he was like, that was probably our father, you know, he returned. And he was like waiting in the bush for his father, Vasil, right? He expected him home, but of course it was just childish expectations, because he never returned, and he never even wrote a single letter after 1945, my friends. So that is the story that I've been told, and I asked myself, look, all right, it happened 80 years ago. Since that time, basically, a lot of things changed, because currently we have databases, we have all sorts of online services, we have all sorts of detectives, we have all sorts of organizations fighting like your heritage, your lost relatives, victims of Holocaust, victims of concentration camps. Oh my God, Bridget, audio could not be gone. I can see it, right? I can see that it works. It should work. Yeah, Bridget, please refresh, all right? Why is it buffering? Why is it buffering? Let me think. Guys, tell me if you can hear me, if the sound is all right, because now I'm concerned. Audio is perfect, audio is perfect, audio is fine, all right. Ali, if you're there, please, like, literally call me, all right, if it disappears, because Flixflux, what I found out, that is exactly what I'm talking right here, right now. And I'm like, guys, there's a bunch of different databases, right? So there must be some kind of trace. Because Lomov generally is, while it's atypical, but it's not as widespread name as like Petrov or Ivanov. And by the way, do you know why the last name was changed to Lomov from the original Ukrainian name? Lom means scrap, like scrap metal, and Russian word lamat means to break. So basically, Lomov can be translated as broken because the Ukrainians, they were broken into becoming Russians back in the Krasnodar region. So I thought, like, I imagine that there must be like hundreds, if not thousands, of Lomovs found, but I should try. And I've spent some time surfing through different databases, you know, looking for different traces that can be found there, like, you know. And I found a database called, just a second, the database is called God damn it. Anyways, I forgot. But I found a database. It's a very, very popular one, actually. There is an open database of Ostarbeiters and Holocaust victims. Like, you can access it. You can find the documents. There is a search that shows you like last name, first name, date of birth, and everything else. No buffering, right? Or buffering, guys. Please let me know. Let me do this, all right? I will literally turn off the effects for my microphone. Oh my god, I'm screaming so much. I'm so sorry. I'm turning this stuff off. And now I'm kind of refreshing it. I hope that it works, all right? Arolsen Archives. Yes, yes, Hans. That is, yeah, that's the one. Arolsen Archives. Oh my god. What do I do with the sound? Guys, I just don't know. All right, let me continue. Just, Ali, don't write in the chat, all right? If my sound starts disappearing and turns into shit, literally call me, all right? I count on you. So I searched the archive, and of course I found plenty of Lomos. I found several people which were in like were killed in Buchenwald and stuff like that, but they had different age. They were either too young or too old. And then eventually I found this stuff. And guys, look at this. So first of all, I'm looking at this whatever package, letter, envelope, whatever it is, and I'm like, holy! Like the date of birth is kind of works, 1909. Vasil Lomov, all right, and together with this envelope, there was another paper, and I start deciphering this one, because here on this letter, you can read, my friends, you can zoom, and you can read that he was a Landsarbeiter, he worked in agricultural something. Village Katerinivka, I don't really understand, because on this letter, it says Katernonovka, and on this letter, it says Katernonovka, but at the same letter, it says Katerinivka. Like, who, what the hell, you know? But look at this. In the very, very center, where, oh my God, let me zoom this for you, all right? Let me zoom this for you so you could see yourself. Here you can see Ulyana Lomov. Okay? This was his document. Lomov Vasil in the top, you see, under the name, under the word Veshtoben, you can see Lomov Vasil, Ehefrau Ulyana Lomov, Katerinivka, blah, blah, blah. And then, guys, I start to decipher this document. Like, what the hell does it mean? Like, what is this letter? What is it? What's the origin of this stuff? Because here in the bottom of this document, in the bottom left corner, you can see his signature. All right? That in the bottom left, that is his signature. That B, that is actually that is Va Lomov. And guys, please let me know if you heard what I was saying, all right? Because to me, I can clearly see that the sound is like fine, but right. So first thing I tried to understand was like, of course, I translated the letter because this is actually his list of his personal things. And word verstorben in the top means dead, means deceased. And I look at the date of like death, right? Because 25th, 10th, 42nd, that is the date of him arriving there. And there in the top right corner, 4th of December 1942, that is the date of death. And verstorben means he died. And at the same time, I look at this signature in the bottom left, and I'm like, how the hell did he sign his own letter or certificate of death? Like, what's the point? So I researched this stuff. When the prisoners of concentration camps arrived to the camp, they were usually given the Effektenkarte. In the Effektenkarte, they had all of their personal possessions and everything else written, down. And they would often give the address of a person to send it to in case they die. And they would sign the Effektenkarte themselves. Greg, hello. Greg Terry is in the chat. They would sign this letter themselves. And later, if they die, or when they die, because we're talking about the concentration camp, right? The word verstorben would be either stamped or written on the letter. And the word verstorben and the date, 4th of December 1942, is the date of his death. That is the stamp. It was stamped on the letter. And, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to understand, like several days ago, doesn't combine, 42nd. Grandma was telling my mom that he went to Germany in 1944. Here we can see like late 1942. Something doesn't work. On the other hand, I look at this letter, my friends. Look, Lomov Vasil, date of birth, 1909. He's 3 years younger than my grandma Uliana, which works. There he says Uliana Lomov. Krais Kiravograd, guys, the village of Kashirka is in the corner between Kiravograd, Dnipro, and Mykolaiv. Like, it could be considered part of Kiravograd. I don't know. Maybe they misspelled Katarinivka. Maybe they, I don't know, written some different place. Maybe my grandpa didn't want to give that place to the Germans. I have no idea. Maybe my grandma misunderstood something or distorted her story. I have no idea, because again, guys, there were reasons people would not tell you the truth, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm trying to process that, because when I served in the police, I realized one thing. People tell you all sorts of stuff, all right? They distort their stories, they distort details, they forget details, they make up details, they distort dates, years even. Like, it happens all the time. If you work in the police, you know that it happens all the time, all right? And I thought, yes, Paul, he arrived in October and died literally 2 months later in December. That's Vasily Lomov. And I'm thinking, damn it, was it him? And this place where this effecting kata was filled, right, was completed, is a concentration camp in Stutthof, which was one of the oldest concentration camps that were organized established on the territory of Poland in Gdansk. That is where primarily citizens from Soviet Union, like Ukrainians or Russians, were sent to die. And my thought was, okay, let's assume that grandma distorted her story and he actually went there in 1942. Why did he go to the concentration camp? And then I realize that apparently it's because he was a gypsy. One of the reasons. So eventually, I think maybe that's the case. By the way, what happened to his, like, his gypsy relatives and grandfathers? I have no idea. Apparently they were eliminated as well. But generally it was the case, you know, in those times you would be told, like, bro, like, we don't care, like, you Jew, gypsy, whatever, like, we don't care. Just hop on that train and go all the way to Germany, you will have a better life. And you hop on the train, you fall asleep, and you wake up in Buchenwald, right? Or in Stutthof. And I think maybe that was the case. And maybe this concentration camp of Stutthof, maybe that was really the place where he saw his last days, because he literally died 2 months after arriving to Stutthof. Most apparently, he was executed. And so I was like, this was my primary version, and I discussed this with my mom. And my mom said, you know, the date of birth works, the name works, the name of wife on the letter works. The year doesn't work. And what my grandma told me doesn't work either. And I'm asking her, well, maybe she was wrong. She says, I don't know. And then, you know, when I already accepted this version and I was ready to tell you about the story back then, all of a sudden, on that very website, I find this. And there, number 69, over there, 69, grandpa, I find the last name, Lomov, and the date of birth, 1907, which works even better because he was just a tiny younger than Grandma Uliana. And what you are looking at is actually the list of workers, my friends, the list of workers who worked in Ruhr between 1944 and 1945. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, can it even happen like this? So you want to say that all that stuff like was a coincidence, right? I don't believe in coincidences. Sorry, I'm not. But was it like the wrong guy, actually, the wrong guy who was killed in the Stutthof? Is it like my grandpa for real? Because this image, this document, is a document listing the workers who worked for the Bergbau Lotharingen, okay? Despite the name Lotharingen, the Bergbau, the company, it was a mining company located in the Ruhr. And this company owned 3 mines. One in, one in Essen, one in... I'm getting old, my friends. I'm 40 only in 3 days. I still have time. Shit. Just a second. Where's my map? One in Essen, one in Bochum, right here, and one just like east of Bochum, right? But in Bochum was one of their mines. And actually, in Bochum, there is a museum of this company, but like not specifically this company, but it's there. So I went to Bochum. And also on that very website, that very database, I find another mention. I don't know if you can see him, but over here, you see, that's like the same name, the same date of birth. All right? 1907. Guys, it works. All right? It works. I believe that this guy was the one rather than the one that was 2 years younger, because it works. There's only one problem, though. There's no name. All right, because if you take a look at this document, there's just the last name. There is no first name. Okay, and I'm like, holy, like this will never end, my friends. Like this quest just goes on and on. All right. So I decided, let's go to Bochum and let's visit that museum and literally ask, maybe they have some kind of archives, because if somebody can tell me something about that, that is literally, you know, the guys in the museum. You become still 222. Is that what they owe me? Anyways, I don't care. I don't think that Reichsmark is something, you know, valuable nowadays. But I went to the museum of Bergbau. That is a museum made of based on the mine in Bochum. Okay. And I went there, I talked to the staff, trying to, I showed them like those papers, and I'm like, where can I find the information about, you know, about my great grandpa? Because if it's true that he was here, then there must be some kind of trace, all right? So what I learned was, and that is actually from that very museum, that every worker, that person on the photo is a Russian, as far as I can understand, but can be Ukrainian because they generally called everybody like Russians or whatever. But every worker, because it's Germany, right? Every worker, every forced laborer who came from the territory of the Soviet Union had their own ID. They had an ID with a photo, with all the details. And I think that if my great grandpa worked there for real, for this company, right? He must have an ID. So basically, what they told me was that you gotta go to archive of like Nordrhein-Westfalen and ask them if they can provide you with this information, because apparently they store those documents somewhere. And currently, if you expect that I will tell you like the, the resolution to this investigation, basically this is where I am right now. Two main versions. One version is the one in the Stutthof, 1942. I don't believe in such coincidences. The dude with a similar birth date with Uliana, wife, but the year is kind of different and doesn't work with the story. Version number 2, the story is legit. He stayed in Ruhr after the war. He was there. Where he went, I have no idea, but there is two last names in two different documents belonging to the same company, Bergbau, that owned mines, where he worked, and the company that still owes him like 22 Reichsmark. But if this is him, his name should be somewhere, like it must be found somewhere, right, in some archives. And this is where I am now with those two versions. Most probably, if you want this story to continue, most probably I will make an inquiry to the archive of the NRW and ask them if they can help me, if they can provide me with any information on this, because I really want to know what happened to him. And if it's true that he's not the one, Vasily Lomov, who actually got executed and died in Stutthof, in Poland, then there is a hope that I will find his traces here, because if he remained here on the German, like on the British or American controlled part of Germany, who knows, maybe he had a family. Maybe I have like, I don't know, like a cousin, riding a bike outside right now. No idea. But I really want to solve this mystery because he never returned and he never wrote a letter. Maybe he did. We just never received it. So basically, my dear friends, that is the story. And even though it's not a complete story and I didn't resolve this 80-year-old mystery, but I really hope that it will give you just a tiny understanding on why I fucking hate Muscovia so fucking much, all right? Why I hate them. Because, guys, Nazi Germany was defeated, Nazi Germans were punished, all right. Russian Nazi were not defeated. And they're still out there. And they are responsible for many deaths in my family. My grandma, where does she come from? Because I was telling you about Grandpa Vasil, who had a son, Arkady, who was my direct grandpa. He was married to my grandma, who was her. She comes from Chernihiv region. There were two sisters, her and her sister, and her father. And her father was known in his village in Chernihiv area because he worked with horses. He knew horses very well. Why did he know horses so well? It's because during the Tsarist times, he was a cavalryman, turns out. And he was in the German captivity during the World War I, actually. That is what I know. So his wife died, and during the Holodomor, 1932, 1933, people told him, bro, you better watch, after your kids, because there's people walking around houses in the village and looking into the windows, searching for children because they want to eat the people, right? The people were, the hungry people were surfing, scanning the houses in the area, looking for kids to eat. So eventually he had to marry another woman who took care after his kids, and then they all moved back to the Kryvyi Rih area. Those are stories of my family, my friends. If you think that, Ukrainians and Russians are the same people, guys, if you respect me, please punch towards the sound, all right? If you hear that coming from somewhere, just punch there, all right? That is literally the story that I wanted to tell you, and basically that's the thing. Please let me know what you think about it. I talked for 1 hour and 30 minutes straight. I deserve a coffee and a puff. This Arolsan archive is so crazy. It's so big. There's probably millions of names, millions of different lists. Again, not only documents from like concentration camps, lists of people that were accused of something and like imprisoned, either by Germans or by British or by Americans who occupied Germany. There are all sorts of lists, like medical lists, all sorts of data, letters, everything. Guys, if you have like whatever relative that you have lost the traces of, please check this out. Arolsan archive, and there's a huge chance that you will find at least something, because they made pictures of different documents. They scanned all the names and dates and numbers, and they put it online, so it's available there. So that is the story, my friends. I felt like I needed to tell you this, first of all, because we should all remember where we come from, right? We should all remember the past, especially if it's a horrible past, to make sure that it will never repeat itself, right? And we should always remember, or at least know just a bit about our relatives, about our grandparents, because those people lived, they had their lives, they had their stories, like Babta Ulyana with her like shovel stick. She killed a piglet. Can you imagine that? How crazy it was. Oh my god. And then a freaking policy. He deserved it though, I think. I don't know. My thoughts? I believe documents. Like, I do believe documents. Again, I'm a bureaucratic ex-cop, all right? I believe papers. So when I see a paper which states that this guy and this wife and the date of birth and everything, I kind of prefer to believe that he was the one who died in the concentration camp. But like the optimistic part of me, and the part that trusts my mother, because she says like, no, the date doesn't work, the name of the village doesn't work, must be a coincidence, right? Who knows? I don't believe in coincidences. I believe papers don't lie, unless it's like, I don't know, Russian Pravda. But that is something I believe. And this document that comes from Ruhr, 1944, 1945. Again, guys, I consider this, that like this can be a coincidence as well, but the name is absent, which is so interesting. You know, Germans. Can you believe that Germans would not care to write down the name of a guy? Like, look, on this document, you can see like the names are kind of fixed with a pen, right? So what are those marks? That's actually a German person was fixing the names to be able to spell them properly, the way they're spelled in Russian or Ukrainian language. All right? So he literally cared about those guys. He or she cared about those workers. Like, at least they cared to understand how to call them properly. All right? And I cannot imagine that they would not write down the name of a guy. Like last name, all right, first name. You tell me, I'm lost. Um, can you trace anything by the number besides the name? Basically, that is like his personal number, all right? This one that you can see here, that next to 69. Oh, grandpa. So that is his personal number. And that number is the number in his personal ID that was made for all forced laborers like him, I think. And if this ID exists, first of all, if his name is Vasil, all right, because this is the most important thing. He can be like Lomov Dima, Lomov Pasha, I don't know, Lomov Andrei. He could be whatever Lomov we can imagine. But if his name Vasil, I'll probably get drunk. I don't know. But it's very, very hard, turns out, to be able to find his name, his first name, and also very, very hard to find like any remaining archives. We don't know if those IDs even survived. We don't know if they even had those archives. But on the other hand, guys, well, if the guy works at the mine, all right, there must be some kind of accountant, right? Accountant department, like they pay them salary, right? Of course, they know his details. They would not save his data under, I don't know, like a dude from Kryvyi Rih, right? They would save proper details like his name, date of birth. Of course, we can see that he has date of birth. So I believe that this data exists. The question is where, and this is another riddle that I will have to solve eventually, because I really, really want to contact the North Rhine-Westphalen archives and somehow find his trace. Another person take that last name to hide his identity. Could be, actually. Could be, of course, if you have no documents, and there could be such cases when a person had no documents whatsoever, no ID, no passport, then this could have happened, actually. And again, there were numerous cases like that. Guy arrived to Germany, and like what he has is literally like a piece of paper from the German commandant's office with his like name and last name. Because he lost his documents in the fire, all right, in a village somewhere. Could be. So who knows, guys? It's not like I believe all the last names I see, because again, I saw a handful of Lomovs, Vasil Lomov, in that archive. Some were rejected instantly because, for example, there was Vasil Lomov who died in Buchenwald. It was a different person, obviously, and there were different other Vasils. One Vasil Lomov, but without the birth date, all right, but who worked not far from Ruhr, actually, south of Ruhr. And I think probably not the guy. Not the guy. There are so many questions. Those two sisters who saw him near the checkpoint, first of all, how come they didn't talk? I don't believe this. They come from neighboring villages. Friends, if you live in neighboring villages and you were taken like 1,000 kilometers away from your house, and you see your neighbor like after a year before returning, like of course you will talk, of course. But they didn't talk to this person. Maybe it was a different person because they say that he didn't look well after a fight, probably. And probably they took him for a different man. That could be the case. So why they didn't talk? Could they took him to for another person? Of course they could. Could my grandma Uliana be wrong about the dates? Who knows? As a cop, you know, I think she had reasons to change dates or, you know, distort them for some reason. No idea. So maybe 69 plays a large part in your life. It must be a relation. My friend, 69 is a Cancer sign. It's my zodiac sign. Not like I am a fanatical, you know, believer in zodiac, but generally it's a Cancer, right? Crab. I'm a crab. So that is one thing. Could that be him? My God, so many things in those papers that, like, I would never consider a coincidence. Who knows? How do you know if someone is Slav or not? I tell you this. If you see this face, like not my specifically face, but this face on the street somewhere, that's the Slav, because Slavs never smile. My lady here says, why, like, what's wrong with it? Like, I don't smile often, all right? But I am uber Slav. I am the worst case of Slavs, because even my Slavs, my friends in Ukraine, they would always ask me like, dude, what's wrong with you? Something happened? You look so sad, so grumpy. And I'm like, this is my natural face, bro. Get lost. This is how I look like, you know, all the time. They just noticed that among the grumpy Slavs, for some reason that I cannot explain, I am like the grumpiest of them all. Again, like, I don't consider myself like a very depressed or grumpy or something, but this is what they say. Like, all of my friends, literally, they go like, bro, something happened. Like there's some kind of problem or something. What you can tell me. I'm like, fuck you. I don't want to see you. Everything's fine. Oh, Frag here has the same problem, bro. You could be Slav, by the way. I don't know. So basically, this is how you can tell if the person is Slav. In most cases, it's either the person is grumpy or like resting Slav face. Huh? So this is how it's called nowadays. All right, I will know. I'll keep that in mind. I have a lot of people saying that to me too, even though I'm British. Leah, I think that is because you're preparing to go to Ukraine in the future, as you said in the commentaries. So most probably it's because of that. Most probably it's like psychologically you're already preparing to go to a Slavic country of Ukraine, and it's like something some subconscious, you know. Have you tried going down the DNA road? I would definitely do that, but that shit costs a lot, actually. I think it's like 100 or 200 bucks. I would better spend them on, I don't know, burgers and milk and coffee. But maybe eventually, maybe in the future. Can we call him Mr. Grumpy, Joshua? I have a lot of names. In the military, you usually have a lot of names. Do a lot of gypsies might have Ukrainian heritage? I have gypsy blood on my dad's side and wondering if a Ukrainian is involved. Could be. Generally, you know, gypsies come from like Indo-Iranian region. They migrated from there and spread all around the world. But you gotta clarify what specifically type of gypsies you are, because there are, for example, Irish gypsies. Irish gypsies have nothing in common with like Romale, all right? They are different nationalities, even though they're both called gypsies, and Irish gypsies know some kick-ass fist fighting, all right? Those guys are tough, but they are completely different from the Roms. And there are, again, several big families of them. I know that Starenko is a Balkan family of Roms. They come straight from Balkans. There is actually like a list of gypsy families, the biggest gypsy families on the Wikipedia, as far as I remember. I found it, I think, on the Wikipedia, but I can be wrong. Like Klingons say, you cannot trust someone who smiles too much. I agree. There's in the Slavic part of the world, there's definitely something wrong about it. However, I would not say that. I would not say that. It's like in Ukraine is different. In Ukraine, when you smile, people smile. They won't be like in Russia, like, why are you smiling? Are you crazy or something? No, like in Ukraine, if you smile, people smile. DNA. I found a billion cousins. If he had a second family, they might show. I gotta check it out. You know, I gotta check it out. And actually, this is something that I will do. Probably in the future when I collect enough money. Uh, I will do that. Cause if I can find somebody That'd be great. But again, how does it work? Because, all right, I will give out my DNA sample. My DNA sample will be compared to other DNA samples of people who gave out DNA samples, right? Or am I wrong? Because not everybody gives out DNA samples. So who knows? Tell me if I'm wrong, guys, okay? Because I don't really know how it works. I know that one time when I worked at the television in 2011, we did a similar experiment. We were making a documentary on the Ukrainian DNA, generally where Ukrainians come from, you know. And we involved a lot of Ukrainian women, specifically, not men, because women preserve the genome much better than men. And female DNA can tell you everything, literally. So we collected a lot of their DNA, and we went to this Austrian lab where they were analyzed. I talked about it, I believe, but I don't really know how they compare it because not everyone, like, guys, did you give out DNA sometime? Like, not a lot of you did, I'm sure. Ukrainian Poles and Bulgarians seem mostly good-natured. The others get grumpy easily. The Czechs are sort of in the middle. I would say Czechs are very funny. Like, they are very cheerful comparing to all others. Check out that music video, Yozhin's Bajan. You will understand what I'm talking about. You probably saw it. Our DNA talks like we do. Basically, yeah, only if you can compare it to somebody's DNA, because it's not really, oh, you did a DNA test, really? That's so exciting. I would like to try. And if we have like an eligible, not an eligible, but trustworthy database of DNA, that would be really, really interesting. Regardless of whether he was your relative or not, I don't understand why the first Lama had 2 skirts and 1 blouse with him when he entered Stutthof. That is another question, because I was translating the text, and that is something that I found interesting. Maybe this is how they called those clothes back in the days. I don't know. Because, for example, when in the Russian language you hear word платье, it means a dress. But also платье meant basically like clothes in the archaic Russian language. So who knows? I really, sincerely, I really do hope that it wasn't the guy in the Stutthof. Dates don't work, and I just don't know. Here I am lost. I literally need more details, because, it's like some puzzles work, but they miss parts, and I need to find those parts. Mitochondrial DNA comes from your mother and tells you about her genetics. Nuclear DNA comes from the father and tells you about his ancestors. This is how it works. 23andMe DNA testing is good for tracking potential health problems. My potential health problem is that I've lost my hair. But again, I had curly hair, actually. I think I showed you pictures. I had curly hair like all the gypsies. You could use the Ancestry site for DNA tests. They are genealogic site. I'll check it out, of course. I will. Are you staying in Germany? Yes. Ja, genau. Basically, that mine in Bochum, that is like 1 hour drive or something. You great. Thank you very much, Denise. You know, if you if you don't have medical insurance like me, you better look good and healthy, because otherwise you're in trouble. I'm about to shave mine off. 20 inches. Your hair, really? That is like, oh my god, half a meter, even more. That's impressive. I had a hair as long as like this, like shoulder length, but it wasn't really cool. You know, when you have long hair, you want to look like a Viking or something. Take a look, for example, at metal singers, like metal artists of 1980s. You know, those washed, clean, puffy hair. You know, that just brings me so much giggles. You know, I love metal of 90s so much because of that. And basically that's what I looked like, because my hair was like very, very curly and puffy. There are cases of prisoners from the Soviet Union who were not properly documented, since they were neither sent to camps nor implemented as Ostarbeiter. Yeah, could be the case. Maybe. It's just I really don't know how to explain this phenomenon, that he only has his Name but not his Vorname. So I don't know. Join the Air Force. I will join like half Air Force. All right, it will be growing here only. I will look like what was his name? Flint from The Prodigy. I saw one of your favorite bands, Ginger. All right, Ginger are so cool. And Tanya, the singer, she's so tiny actually. She's like 1 meter 50 centimeters, I think. She's tiny, but she sings like a angel of hell. Oh my god. Will there be a birthday stream? Guys, first of all, I'm having a birthday in 3 days. It will be on 9th of July. Second thing, we don't congratulate and don't celebrate 40th birthday, all right? Yes, I'm 40. I know I look 25. That is because I preserve myself in dark and cold places for 1/4 of my life, namely like in bunkers, different type. But we don't celebrate and don't congratulate each other with 40th birthday, because in Ukraine we are extremely, extremely superstitious. I'm not sure if it works like in your countries, but this is how it works in Ukraine, for example, in our part of the world. But if in Germany you do celebrate it, for example, I don't mind, I would have a beer. But third thing, on 9th of July in Ukraine we have a mourning day, because I believe 8th of July there was this horrible terror Russian strike on the children's hospital in Kiev, which killed a lot of children and medical staff. And in Ukraine we have a mourning day. So I don't really think it's a good idea for me to celebrate my birthday on this date, on the mourning day. So most probably I will just, I don't know, play Microsoft Flight Simulator, and have a zero alcohol beer. Starsky is a vampire. He's actually gonna. Oh my god. My lady recently returned from a conference in Romania. And the conference took place in Transylvania, actually. And when she told me, I was like, "Oh, Transylvania, Dracula." That was cool. But what can I say? We share the 9th as our birthday, but not our age. Ah, I didn't know that. Starsky only has 25 candles on his birthday cake every year. That's because I cannot fit more. And those candles are really hard to swallow, so I cannot put more than 25 usually. You could celebrate in late July and turn your zodiac sign into a lion. Nice. Guys, tell me this. How do you, German guys, how do you call the tap in the sink, you know, where the water comes from? Like the tap. I want to know. It's important. Do you call it like Han or something? My friend went to the Dracula castle in Transylvania. Pete, there's actually 3 castles. 3 castles that, according to the legend, can belong to Dracula himself. I know that they kind of found his grave, but no body. Whatever. Wasserhahn. So the reason I mentioned this, Wasserhahn, water chicken. You know that I'm deeply fascinated with Persian history, obviously because my lady is Persian, and just check this out. You know that like before that shitty revolution and everything else, they had lion on their flag. That's when Iran was like looked like any other European country, and you know, it was a democratic place. And they had a lion on the flag. And lion in Persian culture is literally everywhere. For example, I don't remember in which country you call this stuff like a dragon, the faucet. In Germany, it's obviously like water chicken, you know, Wasserhahn. In Persia, it's fucking lion, all right? Because they don't give a fuck. So this is why I like it so much. And it's like lion everywhere. Grave but no body. Same with Jesus. I don't know if you know, same but not the same. The story is absolutely different. Actually, Vlad Tepes, the one who was known as Dracula, like it's a real historical dude. He lived for real. So he was like a noble vassal there in his Transylvania. He was a feudal lord, and he was a member of the Order of the Dragon. According to different legends, that is why the Dracula, that is where the name comes from. And when the Ottomans were invading like that part of the world, the Balkans, etc., actually he and his army, they stopped the Turks, and they were like heroes. But the reason for all those legends and crazy stories about Dracula is because he enjoyed having lunch while impaling like a bunch of people on the pole, and he would like, you know, like have coffee and watch them die. And that is why he was known as Vlad Tepes. Tepes, my Romanian friends, I think, might correct me if I'm wrong. It means the impaler, the dude who impales people. It's literally you have a pole, the sharpened wooden pole, and you put somebody on top of it, and this person just slowly, gets impaled more and more until this person dies. And this is how this dude had fun back in those days. He was kind of sketchy. Sounds like my landlord. Oh my god. I'm so sorry. R problem. Not being able to roll the R. Yeah. Vampires everywhere in Ukraine. That's true. We only drink the blood of Russian infants, eat Russian people, especially Russian-speaking people, right? And drink the tears of Russian widows. That's what we do. That is why we look so young. Simon, I agree with you so much. But, in those days, people had a weird sense of entertainment, all right? For example, William Wallace. Leah knows what I'm talking about. William Wallace, the Scottish hero, he was taken all the way to London, I believe, where he was executed. And he was literally cut to pieces. He was castrated, cut to pieces, burned, everything else, and people were just looking at it and celebrating. People had different sort of understanding of what is fun. Because, like, 1980s in the UK, you had Monty Python, right? And Benny Hill. That was, of course, evolution, like big step from what happened to William Wallace. Which, oh my god, Lee, I'm so sorry. That is this Leah. Yeah. Have you ever visited the UK? Actually, I didn't. My friend, why would I ban you? Oh my god. Subtle knife. I almost subtly banned you accidentally in the chat. I'm sorry. Tell me if you're still with us. So my good friend visited the UK. I actually have a lot of friends in the UK, and I think I would really like to visit one time. But unfortunately not in the nearest future. France still had public executions until the late 1970s. Some countries still have them, by the way, until this day. A lot of Russians in the UK, I am not surprised. Again, one of the reasons why Russian oligarchs will never strike European cities like London or Brussels or Berlin, that is literally because they don't want to kill their own kids who live or study in London or Brussels or Berlin. Because we all know that Russians do what Russians do. Yeah. Drowned and quartered, his various parts were sent to cities around England, and yeah, that's the case. Which again, imagine a Christian king who pledged to the Church of Jesus Christ and things like that. And imagine all the Christian people there. Literally, guys, in those years, you would be slaughtered if you were like a different religion. Not even like different, like Muslim, all right, or Hindu or whatever. If you're just a different Christian, right, you would be slaughtered, torn to pieces by Christians. Back in those days, Christians were kind of like a bit sketchier than they are today, I think. Solovyov keeps talking about nuking London on Russian TV while his children are living there, of course. Solovyov, I think his son worked in London and he was banished. I believe because he was selling drugs. Yeah. I just found like 6 relatives in our Olsen archives. Yes, Roman, that's the thing. You can find so many things there, and it's literally so interesting to just serve whole rows. Oh my god, I nearly banned you as well. Tell me if you're with us, all right? Who's not here, please raise your hand. Dean Brown, oh my god, hello my friend. Hello, hello. So cool to see you. Oh, Jesus. It's been years since I quit Facebook. Oh, that's interesting. My dad's parents went east from Austria or Australia? Österreich? Österreich, obviously, it was a small German town before World War One. I found it over 100 years. Wow. My 4 great-grandparents are in the Germany cemetery in Ivan-Franko. That is so crazy. And generally speaking, there are so many native German people in Ukraine. Like, we had a huge diaspora. Basically, the whole Kharkiv city was built by Germans back in the days. I need my mom to check out. Yeah, please do that. Please do that. She may found something because this archive is crazy. Remove your band finger from the knob. So let me tell you a Ukrainian joke. So 2 friends, 2 girls from neighboring villages meet sometime, like after years, and they hug each other and like, oh, Katya, hello, oh, Valia, hello, how are you? And Katya is like, well, I am engaged. I decided to marry this Mikola from a neighboring village. And Valia is like, oh, Katya, I don't know how to tell you. Oh, well, he's like his organ, right? His penis, like, is crooked. Just keep that in mind. And Kat is like, really? She's like, yeah, it's like, it's crooked. And Kat is like, well, thank you so much for telling me. I will keep that in mind. Thank you. So they meet after like a couple of years and they hug each other and like, oh, hello, Katya. Hello, Valia. How are you? And Katya is like, well, I married. I got married. She's like, to whom? And Katya is like, to Mikola from the neighboring village. But he has like a crooked dick. And she's like, well, Valia, we sat down with my mom and we thought about it. We're not gonna use it to shoot, so we don't care. So that's the story. Oh, Kalen Robertson found he had a German ancestor from Odessa, Ukraine. Could be, absolutely. In Odessa, we had a lot of them, actually. Like, generally, in Ukraine, wherever you go, there were a lot of Germans, a lot of Greeks, Turks, of course, like whole Crimean Khanate was populated by Turks and Crimean Tatars, of course. We have so many different nationalities. My God, Georgians, Jewish. We have all sorts of people. Gypsies, of course. Do you know the best recipe for gypsy borscht? So you steal a pot of borscht. Good evening, Mr. Fastbuck. We were talking about William Wallace, by the way, just a couple of minutes ago. All right. Oh my God. 2 hours, 15 minutes. Guys, you must be tired of my blah, blah, blah. Most probably I will be going to bed right now, or maybe not. We didn't talk about food. I mentioned borscht, actually. All right, maybe next time. So I will be probably going to bed. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was extremely important for me to tell you about this one. Imagine those people living in like early 20th century. They would not even imagine that I would be talking about them with you guys. That is so crazy. But if they're somewhere watching us right now, I hope that they enjoy this conversation. So, my dear friends, thank you so much for staying with me. It was so cool. And as always, I'm so happy to see you guys every single time. My next stream will most probably be tomorrow with some of your favorite YouTubers. So please don't miss it. I will keep you informed and updated in the community posts. And as you probably noticed, you can now start like your own topics in the community posts, which I like so much. So we'll see you later. Big thanks to our moderators. Big thanks to all the friends, the old friends and the new friends there in the chat. Big thanks to all the members of the channel for supporting me, and also big thanks to everybody who supports Ukraine, because this is the right thing to do. See you later, guys, and as always, be safe. Bye-bye.